Hello and welcome to Veterans of the Valley. I'm Tom Turbyville. Brent Mullins has a passion that needs a place to call home. It's called the Museum of the American GI, and much of its contents have a temporary home in Brent Mullins' backyard in South College Station. The museum has an active website and a guy in charge who lives and breathes military history. For a living, Brent Mullins sells rare Jeep parts on the internet. But like I said, his passion is the Museum of the American GI, and you can help it become a reality. We'll talk about that later. First, I want to welcome Brent Mullins. Brent, it's an honor to have you. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time because we share this passion for the military and military history. Talk about the Museum of the American GI. It came out of your head, out of your passion. Sort of talk about its genesis and where it stands now.
Well, I'd like to first thank you for having me on the show and for all the support that you've shown to our project over the past couple of years. The Museum of the American GI is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation that was started in 2001. And the goals of the corporation is to establish a permanent military museum in College Station that has a unique purpose. Unlike most other military museums, we want to preserve the vehicles, the uniforms, the equipment, the memories of the servicemen and women of the United States, primarily the 20th century, but not necessarily limited to that. The thing that we feel that's going to make our museum unique among other military museums is that we have a significant and impressive collection of vehicles, and mainly armored vehicles, from the Second World War. And our vehicles are operational. Our vehicles have all been meticulously restored with great effort on my part and other dedicated people to the museum. And once a year, at least once a year right now, maybe more often later, we have a field day or open house where we have a World War II battlefield reenactment with a large number of participants. We run our vehicles, we shoot the cannons, we shoot the machine guns. Of course, it's all blanks. And try and give the public a feel for what these things really sounded like, smelled like, looked like. You just get a three-dimensional idea of what it was like, you know, to see these things move under their own power, which is a unique thing 60 years down the road.
It's really fascinating. It is. Your love of military history obviously came, it's a family thing. Your dad was Brent Mullins, who sadly we lost back in April. And your brother, Bert, served in Vietnam as a Marine, as you also were a Marine. Talk a little bit about your dad. He flew the B-17, the Flying Fortress, 30 missions over Germany, I believe.
That's right. My dad was in the 8th Air Force, the 91st Bomb Group, 323rd Squadron, which was the same group that the famous Memphis Belle was in. He flew 30 missions as a tail gunner, and including some really horrific missions like the bombing of Stettin and the ball-bearing plants at Schweinfurt, and he was on the first Berlin raid.
And I believe I also read that he actually flew over Normandy Beach on D-Day, looked down and saw it all happening.
That was a unauthorized flight, yes. He just happened to be milling around that morning, and someone said, let's go fly and look at the big invasion. And they needed a full crew, and he set the tail gunner seat, and they flew over, and he saw the whole thing.
My goodness. I know that it's not what you came here to talk about, but your passion for the Museum of the American GI doesn't make a living for you. You make a living in a very unique way. Talk about your business.
Well, it sounds like an odd business to most people, but I've had this passion for military things ever since I can remember. And I always had a keen sense for business, too. When I was in high school, I collected uniforms. I would go to gun shows, surplus stores, every place else I could find things. When I found something that I thought was good, I bought all of it and would sell it, and so I could buy more things that I wanted. One thing led to another. I finally got a Jeep. I wanted a Jeep real bad when I was 16 years old. I taught myself how to do everything on it. That led to what is now my career as a Jeep parts business. I have a business called Brent Mullins Jeep Parts. We sell worldwide. We have a website that we have all of our wares listed on. And I have quite an extensive inventory of mainly World War II Jeep parts.
Yeah, when he says extensive inventory, he really means that. I've been out there, folks. And as a matter of fact, there's an organization, a worldwide organization, I guess, called the Military Vehicle Preservation Association. And they have meetings every year. You attend those. So that's where you drum up some business, I take it, right?
That's right. The Military Vehicle Preservation Association is a worldwide organization. It has about 10 or 12,000 members, I think. And we have an annual convention at different locations in the U.S. and people bring their restored military vehicles and they're judged, and they have a big flea market and seminars and all sorts of things dealing with antique military vehicles.
Brent Mullins' backyard is not just any old backyard. It's got, what, how many, 3 warehouses, I believe, in your backyard or more, and just some things scattered out in the yard. And we're going to show you what we're talking about now. We've got an array of photographs. I went out to Brent's place a couple of weeks ago. It's about the 3rd time that I've been out there, and I took some photographs, and we're going to go through them, and Brent's going to talk about them. So let's get going, and here we go. This is in one of your warehouses. What are we looking at, Brent?
This is a 1942 Stuart M4a1 light tank. It has 3 30 caliber machine guns on it, and the main cannon is a 37 millimeter semi-automatic gun. It's fully restored, operational. That it's, of course, will be in the museum. It's powered by 2 Cadillac flathead V8 engines, wow. And it's a really good piece.
It's beautifully restored also. Okay, let's move on to the next photograph. Here we are.
Sitting in the middle back there, that's a 1943 Sherman M4a1 medium tank. That would be, this tank right here would be your classic D-Day tank. This is the mainstay of the U.S. Army at that time period. It's powered by a 9-cylinder radial aircraft engine. This particular tank was built by Montreal Locomotive Works and has a one-piece cast hull, which only railroad manufacturers had the capabilities of doing at that time.
Amazing. Okay.
This is a Ford-built M8 light armored car. It's a 6-wheeled 6x6 vehicle. It's powered by a 6-cylinder Hercules gasoline engine. It has a 30 caliber machine gun, which is coaxially mounted by the main cannon, which is also a 37 millimeter, and it has a 50 caliber machine gun for anti-aircraft use on the turret.
Now, where'd you come up with this? Where did you acquire this particular piece?
This particular armored car I've owned for nearly 15 years, and I found it in a junkyard up in Dallas that had at one time about 6 of them, and the story was they acquired them in the early 60s. They had been confiscated, and they were on their way to Cuba right after the Cuban Missile Crisis. And when Castro took over, the State Department stopped exports to Cuba, and somehow these ended up in the junkyard, which was fortunate for me.
Any idea who Miss Emily is?
That's my daughter.
Oh, okay. You put that on there.
I
didn't know
put
whether
that on
was. You found it like that, or so that's a personalized tank there.
It
for your
is.
daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's move on to the.
This is a 1944 Buick built M18 tank destroyer. This was the best tank destroyer in World War II. It had a 76 millimeter main gun and a 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun. It's a tank destroyer, not a tank. What makes it different than a tank is it's very lightly armored. It has an open top turret, and it was very fast. In fact, this was the fastest tracked vehicle of any vehicle in World War II. Was capable of speeds up to 55 miles an hour, which is quite fast for a tracked vehicle.
it's quite fast for anything, because you know you think that's about how you go on the highway when you're going from one place to another. Maybe a little bit faster, but not much. That's moving a whole lot of heavy armor and moving it quickly.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the next photograph.
This is the M4a1 Sherman again, just a different angle. You can get a good look at that great big single cast hull. This tank weighs 60,000 pounds, and this particular tank has not been restored yet. I got it just like this. We plan on starting restoration on it next year. We'll tear it down, naked to the bare hull and start over on it. But it does run and drive right now.
That's the incredible part, is everything that you're seeing now is part of your reenactment that you do each year, and they run. You can start them up and move them out of the warehouses. Okay, let's move on to the next.
This is another front picture of the Ford M8 armored car. This armored car has all live guns on it, which requires a license for us to be able to do that. But it's quite impressive to see these the tank guns, the tank cannons fire at the reenactment.
Now we move outside. You don't have room for everything inside your warehouses. You've got a lot out in the yard.
Right. This is a 1945 Sherman M4a3e8. This is the last, basically, evolution of the Sherman. It has much wider track, a different angle to the front of the hull, a much bigger turret, and it would have had a 76 millimeter cannon in it. We're going to restore this tank. We haven't gotten to it yet, but so we will have an early version of the Sherman and the very last version of the Sherman.
Let me ask you now, we're taking a look at a picture of this. Is obviously, and somebody would look at that and look at the tanks we saw earlier and say, hey, this is in pretty bad shape. What does it take? How do you even start to restore something like that? Obviously, it's got missing parts, missing a gun barrel. How do you restore something like that?
Well, it's like everything else. If you're really into collecting something, everyone else who's also interested in that, and we network, basically for the parts and such. And I do have a lot of the parts because I've been in it, quite a long time. I don't see any real challenges there. In fact, I think that thing's in remarkably complete and good shape compared to some of the other stuff we've tackled.
Tell you what, a year from now, I'm going to come take a picture of it and see what it looks like, and we'll put it on again. Now, speaking of restoration, here's one of your folks that works for you, and that's just a couple of weeks ago when we took this picture. That was restoration of a tank in another warehouse. Talk about what he's doing there.
Well, this is a 1945 Cadillac-built M24 Chaffee light tank. It's also powered by two flathead V8 Cadillac engines. It has a 75 millimeter main gun, which is not installed at the moment. We have been working on this tank for a little over a year and started with a naked hull. This tank originally came to us from Norway and had been given, I guess, to the Norwegian government after World War II for foreign aid. It was a real hulk. It was missing a tremendous amount of parts, and we managed to find everything. I'm not really missing anything now. And it's in the final stages of restoration after having had to rebuild every last thing on it. It's been quite an ordeal, but it's really coming together nicely now, and I expect to be done with it in probably another 30 days.
Wow. Now we go outside. Here's one of your guns.
This gun is a unique gun. It mounts on a half track. It was the first attempt at a tank destroyer by the Army. This gun is on loan to us from the Armor and Cavalry Museum at Fort Knox, Kentucky. It originally had been set as a monument. You can still see remnants of the concrete around the bottom. In return for restoring this gun for the Army Museum, they let us borrow it so that we can copy a lot of the parts off of it for our own half-track restoration.
All right, let's move on. Here's the...
This is the mainstay artillery of the U.S. Army from about 1940 to the mid-1980s. This is a 105 millimeter howitzer. The Army and Marine Corps had thousands and thousands of these guns, and they are all gone now. They're quite rare in any sort of civilian hands. This is a live registered destructive device according to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. We shoot this at our annual reenactments. It's a really good piece, and we're really glad to have it. It was built in 1943. We don't know where it saw service, but we have every little accessory for it, and it's a very complete, very nice gun.
And that's another angle of it.
Also, the vehicle that's sitting in front of it
Yes.
is a 1943 International Harvester-built high-speed tractor, and its purpose was to tow the artillery, carry the ammunition, and the crew. And this particular vehicle is it weighs 13 tons. It has a ring mount on top with a 50 caliber machine gun for anti-aircraft protection, and it would carry about 8 men in it. And it has provisions to carry the ammunition, and it would tow this 105 howitzer.
Just amazing. Now this is, when I come out to your house, this is what I just sit and am in awe of. This is a Higgins Boat, and people who have knowledge of history of World War II know a little bit about this from the landing of Normandy. Talk about this, and how in the world did you get one of these? I think you told me one time, as far as you know, there are only 6 in existence worldwide, and you have one of them in your yard.
Well, I'm not so sure about the 6, but they're quite scarce. This is technically referred to as an LCVP, which stands for Landing Craft, Vehicle, and Personnel. It's 36 feet long. It had a Gray Marine 671 Detroit diesel engine in it. It would carry approximately 30 combat-loaded troops, or it would carry a light vehicle such as a Jeep. Mm-hmm. It's all made out of wood. Most people don't realize that they were wood. They did have an armor plate on the side just to protect the cargo compartment. That's all. They're quite scarce. This one has not been restored. We found this in a marine salvage yard out in San Francisco, and trucked it back here. We have another one that we're negotiating on right now for parts, and this is coming up real soon. We want to get busy on restoring this, and eventually, put it in a lake and swim it at least a couple times.
Folks, I guarantee you Brent Mullins is the only resident of the Brazos Valley with a Higgins boat in his backyard. What are we looking at here?
This is a Ford-built amphibious Jeep that's under restoration right now. We're about halfway done with it. It's a quite rare vehicle. It's basically a boat on a Jeep. Ford built 12,000 of these, which sounds like a lot, but they're really rare now because anything that'll float will also hold water. So they're all rusted out and junk pretty much, the ones that haven't been sunk. Just as a comparison, there were 600,000 Jeeps built during World War II and 12,000 of these amphibious Jeeps. And this is a really fine example that we have right here that we'll probably have this restored by March is the plan.
All right. Speaking of a Jeep.
Well, that's a 3/4 ton Dodge weapons carrier. That was the standard 3/4 ton truck in World War II. It has a 6-cylinder Dodge flathead engine in it. That vehicle's been restored for about 12 years. We actually took this vehicle to Europe in 1994 and drove it 1,600 miles on the continent for the 50th anniversary of the D-Day invasion.
Wow, that's amazing. I apologize to the Dodge people for calling their vehicle a Jeep, but didn't look like a Dodge.
This is a wrecker that belonged to the museum. You can also see another wrecker behind it. This is a early 1970s M816 5-ton wrecker. that we just use for some of the heavy work we do. And behind it there is a 1944 World War II Ward LaFrance 7-ton heavy wrecker. And we have been known to use both of them for moving a lot of this heavy stuff around.
Those are your workhorses right there. This, I take it, is probably the rarest piece in your collection. Talk about what we're looking at.
This may well be the rarest piece. This is a 1918 Liberty truck. This was the first standardized truck that the U.S. Army tried to develop. We found this up in a barn in Montana. It's in completely untouched original condition. Still the original paint, the original wood bed on it.
Original tires?
Yes,
Like
the original.
the
they're
hard
just
rubber tires?
solid rubber tires.
Didn't
yes.
make for much of a smooth ride, I guess.
But it beat the heck out of walking.
Indeed. Now, it's hard to see, but talk about its cargo back in the back.
That's the limber for our French 75 field gun. We have a model 1897 French 75 gun, which was the standard American artillery piece for the American Expeditionary Force in World War I.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the limber for it. This is just some...
I just took that picture because I thought it looked like what Brent Mullins does. He collects things and puts them in his yard.
This is actually some stuff that has to do with my business. These are 3/4 ton military cargo trailers that we sell.
Okay. Now that needs some restoration, Brent. Yes,
it does, but that looks like a really easy restoration project compared to some of the other ones we've done. This is a 1942 auto car built half-track. This is actually a tank destroyer. That's, as we mentioned, the gun that we're doing for the Army. We're going to mount our gun in this one and actually have a running, functioning, the first Army tank destroyer. That will be the only one in the world that we're aware of that will be running and driving and restored back to original.
Okay, let's move on. You have a Huey helicopter in your yard from Vietnam, I guess.
Yes, we do. This is the Air Force model Huey. This is a TH-1. Originally, it's very similar to the Army models, a little shorter fuselage and a different engine. It was originally used by the Air Force to move their personnel out to their missile sites, such as the Air Force operated all these missile sites over the U.S. in remote locations, and they would move their personnel in this Air Force model Huey.
And that's scheduled for restoration. I know you have the blades over off to the side, and
yes.
Pretty remarkable piece. I think the next picture, yeah, we're going to move indoors. You are also a collector of uniforms, and you have quite a collection.
This is just some of our stuff. Really a very small amount of the uniforms and ordnance items that we have that will be in the museum. The mannequin that you see there is dressed in the standard paratrooper uniform from World War II from the 101st Airborne. And you can see all, and to the mannequin's left there on the floor is a 60 millimeter mortar, the standard infantry mortar from World War II. We have quite a number of uniforms and ordnance items that will be in the museum.
What is that?
That is a PBR, Patrol Boat River. That is the famous Vietnam-era river patrol boat that was, you may have seen, if you ever seen the movie Apocalypse Now, they're water skiing behind one. Mm-hmm. We have a complete functional PBR that will be one of the centerpieces for our Vietnam display. And it's a completely functional vehicle, and hopefully a couple times we might take it out and take a run in it in the river or something.
And that's Brent Mullins. That's your dad. I wanted to include that here. We talked about him earlier, and quite a distinguished veteran and man that I know you're very proud of.
And I appreciate you for mentioning him.
Wow. And this is all in South College Station, folks. Let's talk. We've got just a couple of minutes left. In March, you're having your open house, and you want to invite the public out there. Talk just a little bit about that.
Public's invited. Any scouts that come out in uniform get in free. It'll be about, I think, at 1:30 Saturday, March the 25th. We have a big military flea market going on out there. If they want to come earlier and take a look at that, and then at 1:30 the big reenactment starts. And I think this is about the only place you can see something like that in the South.
And that'll be in March, and we'll have you back on before that to talk about it. We need to tell people where you are. You actually already have the land for the Museum of the American GI. You're just looking for the help to build the actual building itself. And tell them exactly where it's located out on Highway 6 South.
We're just south of Santa's Wonderland, about a quarter of a mile on the same side of the access road as Santa's Wonderland. We've been promised help from the architecture department at A&M, and we just need some infrastructure. We have the land, we have the collection, we just need a building.
Take the Texas World Speedway exit and just stay on the access road, and there you are. I want to put your website up on the screen. It's very easy, www.museumoftheamericangi.org. And thank you for being with us, and thank you for letting us tell your story. It's a remarkable story.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, thank you. You've seen that Brent Mullins has no ordinary backyard. A Higgins boat, several battle tanks, a Huey helicopter, and a whole lot more. And all they need is a home, and that will be the Museum of the American GI. For more information, go to the website, museumoftheamericangi.com. Please thank a veteran today, and thanks to our underwriter, First American Bank. I'm Tom Turbeville. Join us next time on Veterans of the Valley.